All right, we're working on a 2000 Ford Ranger that we suspect has a plugged exhaust. And the first thing that I like to do with plugged exhaust testing is to take a vehicle for a ride and look at my O2s at wide open throttle. We talked about this in section 1. We talked about this in sections 4 and 5, where we use the O2 sensor as a fuel delivery guide. A low power complaint, what we're thinking about is dirty mass airflow, low fuel pressure, or plugged exhaust. Those are your top 3 low power, non-misfire type complaints. So we use the O2 as a guide. I pulled up the scan data, and where I want you guys to focus would be right here on our bank 2 sensor 1 O2, and then our bank 1 sensor 1. If we look at those two, and then right where I have this yellow cursor is an area where we're at wide open throttle. And we can actually look at the TPS right here. Look at this yellow cursor here, this yellow cursor here, and this one here. And I'll zoom in here on that so we can see that a little bit better. Throttle position sensor at wide open throttle. What is this telling me right here? This current number, this is 830. That's pretty tough to see, but that says 830. Maybe I can use a yellow marker. That's 830 millivolts right there on that O2. This one is 886. What type of mixture are we seeing at wide open throttle? Rich. So can we rule out low fuel pressure, dirty mass airflow at this point in time? And I think the answer is yes. Time and time again, I've used this test to say we do not have a fuel delivery problem. We have potentially something else going on, and a plugged exhaust is suspect. So real good test for that. A few other things maybe I can point out to you. And this is maybe a little bit off subject, but it is things that we have to learn. The baro frequency on Fords. This is unique to Ford. That Ford will update its barometric pressure off of the mass airflow at wide open throttle. And to me, when I see low baro voltage or low baro frequency, really I'm at 144 is the lowest number we're seeing there. That is also an indication of a dirty mass airflow sensor. If the mass airflow is dirty, the signal voltage is weak at wide open throttle, and so your baro gets updated to a lower altitude and it throws things off. Can make it run even leaner. There is a variable to that though, and that would be if your exhaust is plugged and your engine's not exhaling, it's not inhaling the same, and that number is going to also be low from a plugged exhaust, and I believe that's what we're looking at. Another thing I don't like when I'm doing mass airflow testing, and we've talked about this, section 12, is on Fords, we look for mass airflow voltage to go to 4 volts at wide open throttle, and the most that I'm seeing, this line right here, is 3.53. So I have 2 other data PIDs, guys, that are telling me potentially we have a dirty mass airflow sensor, which is contradictory to what I just said. 3.53 volts at wide open throttle on a mass airflow suggests that mass airflow is dirty. 144 hertz suggests, for our baro, suggests a dirty mass airflow because of where we live. We're only about 600 feet on average, maybe 1,000 feet in our whole surrounding area on average above sea level. Sea level is, I believe, it's 160 hertz is sea level, and what we should typically see in our area is around 155, roughly, hertz on a baro number on a Ford. Guys, this came from the original digital map sensors that Ford used frequency signals from. It's the same range. That's why they use a frequency still for barometric pressure. It's a calculated value by the computer. So let me see if I'm making myself clear. I have a baro frequency that's low, suggesting a dirty mass airflow. I have a mass airflow voltage that is low at wide open throttle, suggesting a dirty mass airflow. Why am I saying it's not? I'm saying it's not because, not that one, sorry. What are my O2s doing? This is my TPS at 4.6 volts, wide open throttle. What are my O2s telling me? Rich. And what does a dirty mass airflow sensor do? Cause a lean condition. I have a dirty mass airflow case study. You guys can watch that at another time. That's the title of it, Dirty Mass Airflow Case Study. Watch that case study. But this truck wouldn't get out of its own way. I use that term a lot. Very low on power. And I believe we have a plugged exhaust. And these numbers, mass airflow voltage being low and the baro frequency being low, is not because of a dirty MAF, but it is because the engine is not breathing like it should be because the exhaust is plugged. So do you guys understand that variable? I have this listed too. In section 12, when we talked about mass airflows, I talked about mass airflow trouble codes when there is no mass airflow problem. I think it's listed like that. And I showed a picture, if you guys remember, of an air filter element that was, actually I can just show it to you. Remember this page? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Mass airflow signal low with a good mass airflow sensor. I'm pretty sure somewhere on here I have a plugged exhaust. Do I? If I don't, I should. What do I have listed as number 1 up there? Vehicle exhibits similar symptoms as a dirty mass airflow sensor. However, the sensor's clean. Ford baro frequency, HZ, will also be lower than normal. Is this where we are? Sounds familiar, right? What's the first thing I have you looking for? A plugged exhaust. Engine cannot exhale if it cannot inhale, so wide open throttle, our numbers are going to be lower than normal. A quick test, what do I have us doing? O2, wide open throttle, if it's fixed rich, plugged exhaust. So I have this in here. Just wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of it. For future reference, you get to this point again, maybe you forget that I made a video here on this. I have this information in here that you guys can refer to later. All right, so let's go to the vehicle now, and I want to talk about maybe some of the variables we have with testing a plugged exhaust on this. Normally, what I do on Fords is I will check a back pressure, do a back pressure reading on a device known as a DPFE sensor. It's a pressure sensor for the EGR system. I have some videos where I'm showing that. I can't remember the title offhand. I'll have to put a link in this video that references that, where I show how to do back pressure testing on oxygen sensors as well as other locations on the car. DPFE, it has 2 lines that go right to the exhaust system, and it's very easy to do. Now the problem on this Ford is it does not have an EGR valve. If it had an EGR valve, there would be a tube that would be running from the intake down to the exhaust on this side. So we have an issue. There's no DPFE sensor on this Ford. I can't do an easy back pressure test. So my next option would be to go to the O2. This is the O2 on the driver's side. It is not in a very easy location. It looks like there's a cap for where the EGR tube would be if this had an EGR valve too. We could go there, but I am sure that heat would be needed to take that off, and we'd have to get it from underneath. So driver's side O2 is not an option. And that's the other thing, is there are 2 upstream O2s. There are 2 cats on this engine. So which one's plugged? Is it both? Is it one? Is it the other? We'd have to pull both upstream O2s out and get a shot out of both of them. The other upstream O2, I can't even see from the top at all. So I'm definitely not going to be able to get the camera on it. So what I'm telling you guys is there has to be another way without removing the O2s, and I'm hoping to show you that, and it's to use an in-cylinder pressure transducer and look at the waveform. We should be able to tell if this cat's plugged up. So all we need to do that test is to remove a spark plug on each side of this engine, which may not be all that easy to do, but it's probably going to be better than removing the O2s. Something I guess I forgot to mention is this did have a misfire before this problem occurred, and the owner told me that it was driven for about 20 minutes with a misfire. And the misfire was corrected. The misfire codes were on cylinders 4 and 5, and 4 and 5 would be on one bank of this engine. Is it driver or passenger side? Where's number 1 at? Number 1 is, I think, passenger side. Yeah, so Fords number these 1, 2, 3 on the passenger side, 4, 5, and 6 on the driver's side. So we suspect highly that it's the driver's side one that's restricted, but it could be both. So we'll start with driver's side. We'll pull one of the spark plugs out. It doesn't matter which one. And I'll get you guys a shot of the waveform, and then we'll talk about it. All right, guys, so the tool I'm using, it's a picoscope, which is a laptop-based scope. And I'm using a pressure transducer that is installed on channel A. And what I'm going to do is put this in the cylinder, and it's going to allow me to read in-cylinder pressure. All right, there's a shot of the hose in the cylinder, and all we do is we connect our pressure transducer on top of that, just like a compression gauge, and then we'll get a reading at idle, and then maybe we'll do a higher RPM, maybe 3,000 RPM steady, and compare the two. All right, before we start this, something else to point out that's important is that I ground this plug wire out. We have this plug wire just laying there. We can't let that be that way. We have to give this energy somewhere to go. So I'm just going to use my incandescent test light and connect that up to ground to ensure that we're not overloading this ignition coil, okay? Because we want to do this with the engine running. Now it'll take me a second or two to get everything set up the way I want it. I have to tell my scope what I'm using first, which is I'm using this WPS 500 that's a pressure transducer in range 1, and that just changes my scaling to the left. So my range 1 is my 500 PSI scale. I believe it's 500, yes. Maybe we can leave it on a 200 for now. Time base, I'm at 50 milliseconds right now. We have an exhaust hose on this. Is there a hose? We're good? Okay. We're not going to run this long, so I'm thinking about the injector here, and can I even get to it to unplug it? No, not easily. So go ahead and start that. Turn your defrost off, AC off. All right, shut that off. Just want to talk about this waveform very quickly with you guys. From this point, this is the first time you guys have seen anything like this, so that's why I want to do this. From there to there would be 720 degrees of crank rotation. What we're looking at, so we're clear, is we're looking at in-cylinder pressure. I'm not in the intake manifold, I'm not in the exhaust, I'm in the cylinder. The spark plug's been removed. There is no power stroke taking place. The power stroke is when we fire that spark plug and we ignite the air-fuel mixture and we force the piston back down. So we don't have a power stroke in here. The piston's being dragged down, and we'll just, for argument purpose, we'll call that the expansion stroke. That's what's going on. We can call it power if we want to too. But if we were to separate these, we can do that with some partitions in here. Watch, I'll add them. I added 4, and it's kind of tough to see here, but there's very dim cursors in here now. Can you see them? So this is 720, and that means that each of these would be 180. So this is 180, and this is 180. You guys follow? And so on. So top dead center compression, that's the peak of this. This would be when we would ignite, when we'd fire the spark plug, and we could call that the power stroke. This 180 would be our power stroke. What would be next? Intake, compression, power, exhaust, right? So exhaust would be next, and then what? Intake and compression. Does that make sense? So looking at this area in here, which would normally be our power stroke, we call the expansion stroke because, again, we're not firing the spark plug. We're dragging the piston down into that cylinder. I have to teach you a little bit about the waveform before I can talk about what we're looking for. My eye is looking right here, guys. I'm looking right here. Why would I be looking at that line? What is going on in here is the exhaust valve is open. If we have a plugged exhaust, where are we going to see elevated pressures from a plugged exhaust? Right here in this area. Okay? Now follow me for a second. If our valves are closed during the power stroke, so this line here is 0. This is my 0 PSI line. We're drawing into a vacuum because the valves are closed. This is in the cylinder. It normally wouldn't be there, but it's there because we're not firing the spark plug. So right around here, see if this makes sense, we're kind of in a vacuum here, and then it starts to rise. Right in that area is where the exhaust valve opens. And somewhere in this area is where the exhaust valve closes. This is where our focus needs to be at 3,000 RPM. When we do back pressure testing, we want higher RPM, we want more flow in and out of the engine to try to recognize that bad cat. And what I expect to see is I expect to see this number get very elevated. Okay? The reason that you will see turbulence in here, in fact, the reason that we will see, let me back up. The characteristic that we see in here will have a lot to do with where the cylinder is that you're measuring within that exhaust manifold and what type of exhaust manifold you have. If you have a true header system as opposed to where all the exhaust pulses are getting dumped into one location, that's going to change what that looks like. So you'll have some turbulence in there. And you know, I don't know if I'm maybe overanalyzing this, guys, but I'm seeing an elevated pressure right here just at idle. That wouldn't normally concern me, but I'm, you know, kind of nitpicking this a little bit, and I can get a measurement there. So it would be, oh, that's time. My measurement as far as pressure goes in that area, yeah, that's pretty high. That's 3 PSI before the exhaust valve closes and the intake valve opens. So maybe zooming in on that a little bit more would have been more evident. I guess I really didn't see it initially because look at my scales. I'm at 220 some, right, PSI. Scaling, that's why I'm maybe missing that. So we can alter that a little bit and really maybe make that a little bit pronounced. Whoops. To move that. So is that a little bit more evident now of that pressure in that area? Possibly. So remember this side here, right? We're at 3.3 PSI right in this area, okay? Same thing we'll do on the other side. We'll do it at idle and we'll do it at 3,000 RPM. So the next thing I want to do is to run this again. We'll get our cursors. We'll get this stuff out of here. Don't need any of this right now. Don't know why that's still on the page. Good, good, good. Okay, I'm probably going to have to adjust my time bases because we're going to have a little bit of a higher RPM. So go ahead and start it. And give me 3,000. That's good, kill it. I don't even think we need to put a cursor in there, guys. What do you think? That's pretty freaking cool, isn't it? Well, here's the thing. You can't take an O2 sensor out of a car. It doesn't have a sensor, a DPFE, or some other type of easy access to do a back pressure test. Can we put a scope in the cylinder and see a back pressure problem? The answer is yes. So let me get your focus up here. If you're not seeing it already, you should be. We'll just focus in on a zoomed in area. Wait, let me do this first. I want you guys to see our 0 line. See the 0 line right here? And then you can actually see we're almost hitting 22 PSI. That's ridiculous. All right, so let's take a measurement of that right there. I can't believe that it even runs at that. See, I'm also not used to looking at in cylinder and like that far up as far as pressures go. That's crazy. Definitely a plugged cat, no question about it. Here's what we know right now. For sure, this is the other nice thing about doing it this way, is we know that your driver's side bank 2 cat is plugged, for sure. Questions on that waveform, guys? Your 0 line is, here we can actually punch that in, which I just learned not too long ago. It makes it a little easier. We can just, should be able to drop that at 0. Here's my 0 line right here. This is 0. And then this line right here, we're hitting 20 PSI. When is that 20 PSI? Right, I mean, it's not 20 the whole time. You know, you're about 10 PSI right there. See, the other maybe difficult part for you guys is you don't even know what good ones look like yet. So this is not good. I promise you that we have a plugged exhaust. We're gonna do the same thing now on the other side. Any questions? Definitely driver side. Going to the passenger side next. We'll put this spark plug back in, reattach the plug wire, do the same thing with the other side. As you can see, I'm now in bank 1. We're in the number 1 cylinder, I believe. Doesn't matter, any of the cylinders on bank 1. You see how I have the plug wire sorted out. Just using an incandescent test light with the point of it between the electrode and the boot. I'm not poking into the boot, just giving that spark somewhere to go. Let's see what bank 1 looks like now. We'll do it at idle and 3,000 RPM. All right, more importantly, it is the 3,000 RPM one, but we'll do it. We'll do them both again. And I didn't change my time bases, so we should be good. That is 0, that's important. Go ahead and start that up. I see a difference. All right, that's good. Getting a little bit of feedback here, a little bit of noise. That might be my pressure transducer and where it's located. Yeah, I'm very, very near the alternator, so we won't worry about the little spikes that are in here, but if you take a look at, well, we'll go in this area. No, we'll start the same way we did before. Where's my 0 line? It's right here. And we were hitting about 3 PSI right here in this area. You remember? Well, that looks pretty good. So let me save that picture. Or did I change my time base? Did I alter my time base between idle and 3,000? I don't think I did either. Maybe we had this at a little bit higher RPM when we first took it. I remember seeing more pulses, but that's good enough. We'll save that one. That's bank 1. All right, so let's unfreeze this and start that. We'll go 3,000 RPM again. Let it idle again. And then hold it at 3. Okay. Get a number for you guys. It's significantly better. It's half of what we have on the other side, but it's still not good. And I guess there's variables to this, and I guess it's worth talking about it. You know, I trust my back pressure tests, and maybe part of me doesn't trust this one completely yet, because this is only the second time I've done it with a plugged exhaust. I'm confident in the last reading having 20 PSI, this one having 10. But I guess the variable would be if there's a downstream issue too, it's going to back up and affect both sides. Is there 3 cats on this one?
I don't believe so.
Or is there just 2 up by the manifolds?
I believe there's only 2.
Some of the systems would have 2 pre-cats and then 1 main one. So do you guys understand what I'm saying though? There's a variable to this in identification. All right, so what I should have done, guys, is I should have looked at this exhaust before we did this. My hopes were that I was going to be able to identify not only a plugged exhaust, but be able to tell you exactly which cat it is. And I just learned a valuable lesson myself on camera, or whatever we learned together. The setup on this, it has 2 small pre-cats, and I'll throw, when you guys watch this later, I'll throw in I can stand to the side, and I'll put it right there. There's 2 pre-cats, or small ones, and then it goes into another cat and yet another cat. So I'm confident that the driver's side is worse than the passenger side. I am worried about the second cat back as well. The front pipe gets replaced together. It's all one unit, so we don't really have to worry too much about that. What we have to worry about is the one right behind that. In the field, when I've run into this in the past, to be honest with you guys, when I find a plugged cat, it pretty much is getting all of them. I don't know if that's necessarily the best way to approach it. If it's my car, you know, or if it's your car, we want to try to do this as cheaply as possible. I think the only option is going to be to take that front head pipe off and eyeball the back cat, but I don't know. I mean, I'm confident that your exhaust is plugged. I don't like this number. You still have 10 PSI on that exhaust on the driver's side or passenger side too, which to me says that we're dealing with the cat behind it as well. Now, is it both cats? I think the only way to know for sure would be to drill a hole and use that back pressure gauge and, you know, tack it up when we're done. That would be an option. I think if it was me, I would probably end up doing that. I've never drilled holes in an exhaust system. If this is a customer's vehicle, it's getting all the cats. We don't know how long it's been driven. If it was a customer, you don't know how long it's been driven with a misfire. You said 20 minutes, so, but that's enough to cook them. Clearly a plugged cat here too, even on the passenger side. Again, if this was a true dual system, it'd be a little bit easier to do. Right, 1 cat each, true duals all the way back, but there are variables. Definitely plugged exhaust. It's a good test to learn how to do. It was a lot easier than taking the O2s out for sure. Okay, and again, what caused it was misfiring primarily on the driver's side. We don't know if, you know, there were misfires on the other side or not, but that was the cause of the melted cats. All right, cool.